Brad Dison here. I wonder if you remember this. When we think of gunslingers in the Old West, the image similar to that of James Butler comes to mind. He was usually well dressed and always carried a pistol on each hip. In addition to the pistols, James usually had his trusty rifle as well. He wore a large cowboy hat, not as part of a look, but for practical reasons. It provided shade from the hot sun. His contemporaries said James swore like a trooper, but was generous to a fault. James's major weakness was poker. John Malone, a longtime friend of James, contended that James would rather indulge in poker than eat. On one occasion, when luck was not on his side, he bet his last worldly possession, a black and tan terrier. The outcome of that particular poker game is unknown. James's reputation as a gambler and gunslinger preceded him. If someone wanted to settle a dispute without firearms, James was always happy to oblige. Most of the time, however, James and his opponents settled their arguments with firearms. James's friends claimed he always tried to avoid a gunfight, but when forced into one, he made sure to have the advantage. To James, there was no such thing as a fair fight. He wanted the odds in his favor. His draw was fast and his aim was true. By his own admission, James had killed as many as 36 men, all of which were deemed self-defense. In 1860, he and his friend Bill Story got into a dispute with a gang just north of Fort Kearney in Nebraska. Details of this dispute, like the outcome of the poker game when James bet his terrier, have been lost to history, but by the time the shooting stopped, James and Bill had killed 3 men. In 1863, James became involved in a bitter rivalry with a gang of robbers who stole from travelers. One day, he stopped at a friend's home near Marysville, Kansas. His friend was not home, but his wife warned him that 10 men, members of the robber gang, had come from Virginia City to kill him. Just at that moment, James heard several horsemen approaching the house. Unconcerned, James told Miss Walters, "Well, little woman, don't be frightened. Get behind the chimney and we'll stop them." The posse surrounded the house and one of them shouted, "Is James here?" "Yes, come in and get him," James replied with a yell. To his surprise, someone opened the door. He watched as 2 men cautiously stepped into the doorway with pistols in their hands, ready to fire. They had not yet seen James, but he certainly saw them. They were easy pickings for James. James fired his pistols and killed the 2 men. The rest of the posse fled. As they rode away on their horses, James took careful aim with his rifle. Pow! James fired a single shot from his rifle and killed the man from a distance of 250 yards. James always considered this the best shot of his life. In 1865, while in Springfield, Missouri, James and Davis Tutt were playing a friendly game of poker. James and Davis, both scouts during the Civil War, James for the Union and Davis from the Confederacy, somehow became acquaintances. Some people even claimed that they were friends. During the game, James lost approximately $35 to Davis, and James agreed to pay Davis at a later date. On the following day, James saw Davis sitting at a poker table and sat down with the intent of playing a game of poker to win some of his money back. James took out his prized pocket watch, looked at the time, and then placed it on the table. Davis requested the money James owed him, but James said he would pay him as per their earlier agreement. Davis snatched up James's prized pocket watch from the table and told James that he would walk with the watch across the public square at noon. Davis wanted to show everyone that he had forcibly taken James's watch in lieu of the debt, which would have damaged James's reputation. James offered no reply, but the challenge was set. Just before noon, a large crowd gathered on the public square, anxious to see what would happen. Many of Davis's supporters gathered on the southwest corner of the square. At noon, just as promised, Davis began walking across the town square, dangling James's prized pocket watch for everyone to see. People gasped when they saw James walk through the crowd of Davis's supporters. When James and Davis were about 30 feet apart, they both drew and fired their pistols. James, confident in his aim, didn't wait to see the effect of his shot, but turned the pistol on Davis's supporters. James asked if anyone else wanted any more shooting, but they all declined. Davis made no sound. Contemporary newspapers reported that Davis died instantly from a single shot through the heart. James, still aiming his pistol toward the crowd, retrieved his prized pocket watch. Despite how often it appears in Hollywood films, this was one of the rare occasions in the history of the Old West when there was a real quick-draw gunfight at noon on a public square. 11 years later, James died while doing what he loved most, playing poker. On August the 2nd, 1876, Jack McCall sought revenge because he claimed James killed his brother in an unfair gunfight. Jack found James playing a version of 5-card stud in a saloon. Without raising anyone's suspicion and without saying a word to anyone, Jack walked up behind James, pulled a pistol, and fired one shot into the back of James's head. 39-year-old James Butler died instantly. Jack McCall was executed the following year for James's murder. Legends persist that James's poker hand consisted of a pair of black aces, a pair of black eights, and the hole card, the one face down on the table, which was unknown. Whether this legend is true or a work of fiction, a poker player who receives this combination of cards today is said to have the dead man's hand. The poker player who killed 36 men, who retrieved his prized pocket watch at the cost of another man's life, and who died while holding the dead man's hand was James Butler Wild Bill Hickok. Did you remember that? I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching.